And we are live. Hey guys, give us a second while we share some stuff here to our personal pages.
Boom, boom. Anyways, welcome you guys. Good to have you with us today. And Adam and I are pastors at the Branch NC. If you are in the Raleigh-Durham area, 630 Cary Christian Academy, we'd love to see you guys there and be a part of that. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is something, Adam, that I've just seen pandemic in the body of Christ. And that is just people, and I jokingly say that people have post-traumatic church syndrome. So many people offended and they get hurt and, I'm never going to go. And, they back out. And I was really thinking about just the whole culture of people being offended and people leaving. And so let's talk a little bit, Adam, about that whole thing about people getting offended today and some of the reasons we think people are and possible solutions to the spirit of offense.
Okay, so let me see how we're going to unpack this. But when we're talking about this, what Nick and I have been and wanted to open up today a little bit was how the difference of having types of leaders. So you have sons or hirelings, right? And so a lot of times we have offenses that happen or issues that happen within the church because we've come up with a model that's efficient, that's like extremely efficient, but it's non-relational. And it's not set in a framework by which it's conducive to more life. And so essentially what happens is we max out a leader to the point of whatever they can carry and then run them. And if we have someone who's a son, we burn them out. And if we have someone who's a hireling, it's a stepping stone. But our model, as it were, I think, invites offense or invites the situations that bring about offense, I think would be a better way to say it, Nick. Would you agree with that framework there? And hey, Jeff and Patricia, thanks for jumping on with us.
Adam, one of the things I see is it's almost like a mentality when we're in Luke chapter 15, and we talk about the prodigal son.
Okay.
Oh, there's two sons and they're both prodigals. And the older son is the one who is not acting as a son, but he's acting as a servant. I mean, what's his response? He's jealous. He's like, hey, how come he gets all this? And the father's like, don't you realize that everything that I have is yours? This is all available to you. And you could ask this at any time. So we're really seeing two sons. One's an orphan, right? Yep. The older son is an orphan, right? The other one is broken, and he comes to the epiphany of like, oh my gosh, it's so much better at Father's house. I'm going to return. But we see the heart of the Father in all this. And one of the things when we're looking at sons and fathers, it's a big issue. Titus is Greek, fully Greek, right? But then we have Timothy, and his mom is Jewish and his dad is Greek. And Paul is going to say something which almost seems convoluted, right? Because he's like, I'm going to circumcise you. And when we read Paul, he's like, he's not that. He's pulling everybody away from the law. But with Timothy, he makes Timothy get circumcised. He cuts on Timothy. And why did he do that? Well, he did that because he realized, I'm going to do something to you as a son that is going to hurt you. And you're going to be sore for a while. But the reason I'm doing this to you is because I love you. And I want to see the best for you, right? So he's going to do something that might seem painful. And I don't know how you feel about that, being a grown man getting that done, but like, no way, right? But I'm like, really? I mean, the whole idea is like, what? You're going to do what? When we read Joshua is going to circumcise all the men of that generation, getting them ready to come into the promised land. And this is what struck me. And in Joshua, it says, and they did not leave the camp till every man was healed. And so I see a lot of people today who get cut. They get hurt. They get sore. Go
ahead. I'm going to run that line out. Go ahead.
They get sore and they're like, heck with that. I'm leaving the camp. I'm leaving what, because Joshua's intent is good, right? Paul's intent is good, but they get offended. And what happens is they leave and go to another place where they're still bleeding. They're going to get cut on again. and they're going to go to another place. And so it's two dimensions here. First of all, it's the dimension of a father and a son. And what I see in the kingdom today are a lot of sons. You got guys in their 60s who are wearing the skinny jeans and trying to be a son. And let me unpack that for you, because sons relate to sons. Sons bicker with one another. I'm cooler than you. All that. My dad likes me better. That's how sons interact, right? They roughhouse. They do all that. That's sons. But in the kingdom, Paul says we have so many teachers, but we have very few fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And what Paul is saying is we have a lot of sons, but we have very few fathers of the faith. And being a father of the faith, and Adam, although you're uberly younger than me, right? You really have a father heart where you will speak truth to people, not worried about a popularity contest, but I'm speaking this to you because I care enough about you that I don't want to see you in this place. I want to see you get to your promised land and that place that God has for you. And I see, and so maybe it's an attitude in church today that we've fostered a lot of sons. Sons do this, right? Now this is pastor talk for those who are on. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Patricia. But how pastors interact. So you're at a pastor's conference. Hey, what's your name? Adam, good to meet you. Where are you from? Cary, North Carolina. What do you do? I'm the senior pastor. That's so awesome. Next question. How large is your church?
Yeah. How do we compare ourselves one to another?
And then we automatically, we're going to judge you. Like we're either going to marginalize you or elevate you. Yep. And that's son thinking. That's not father thinking, right? Yeah. How healthy is your church? How many people have you equipped? What is the presence of God there? Talk to me about this. Or is it just, how to draw people in? Way different. The model of the church today is based on sonship, not discipleship. And fathers, right? What does the Bible say? The father disciplines those whom he loves. Discipline for the moment seems unpleasant. Getting cut at the moment seems unpleasant, but it will bear fruit, right? And that's part of the thing. If you see somebody, remember the old story, the king had no clothes, right? Everybody's, oh, you look great. And reality is he got sold something, but it took that kid to speak a truth. It took a childlike heart that says, hey, this is so obvious. Why isn't anybody speaking truth to you?
Yeah. And I think it's, when you look at Timothy and Titus and you say, okay, well, why Timothy, not Titus? And it's like, well, the way that you're cut is conditioned to the assignment that you carry. And so at times, what we don't want to do is we get into this place of sonship. And there's a dynamic here where there's an immaturity, I guess would be the word to use, is we start to look one another. And it's like what Peter does when Jesus is letting him know, hey, at the end of your life, things are going to go poorly. The first thing Peter does is goes, yeah, but what about John? Like, he's not even he hasn't even thought through logically. Like, the guy just told me I'm going to die. He's like, hey, if I'm dying, does John die? Because, I feel like John, and you can almost see in Peter this insecurity of like, well, I thought I was the special one. And if I'm dying, well, what about John? And there's that place of going, you have to be willing to pull back and say, and trust that maybe this person that's cutting on you or addressing something in your life doesn't have a false agenda, doesn't have a dog in the hunt. They actually just want to see you healthier. Hey, Tiffany, glad you're jumping on with us from Tennessee. But you're hoping, that, and I guess let me say it this way, as someone that's underneath someone else's care, you're hoping that whatever counsel they give you, whatever cutting they bring is to your betterment, right? But the other side of it is when you're the one doing the cutting, you're hoping that, like you mentioned, they will stay long enough to heal. Yeah. Because so often, the moment you begin to cut, they take off running. And the worst part is, it's like, if you won't take the cut from a father's hand, right, from a leader's hand that God's entrusted you to, well, then now we have to ask the question, would you also stay steady when the wolf comes, or would you prove yourself a hireling? Because if you won't let a father cut on you, you're going to tell me that you'll fight the wolf? Because that cuts as well. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Bob.
Does that make sense though? Because I feel like that's the real question is can you withstand a cutting season?
Yeah, and let's talk about that because there's just a word going around today: abuse, abusive leader, right? You're an abusive
Yes.
leader,
Mhm.
and what you need to understand is what does that even mean? Like they're saying stuff that I don't want to hear, I don't want to activate on, but a father.
Mhm.
Now I'm not going to negate that there is abusive leadership,
Of
right?
course, there can be.
Without a doubt, but
Yeah.
we try to pull away from the painful things, the cuttings that we
Mhm.
sometimes get to really go inward and go, is that true in my life? Like, are they like when I do this, like, is this how people are perceiving me? Right.
Yep.
So fathers speak truth,
Yep.
right? They're not concerned about like, well, what's my popularity? Am I going to lose this person over it?
Mhm.
I'm going to offend because if I lose somebody, right,
Yep.
then numerically the idol is how large is your church, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's an
Yep.
idol. It's an idol, right?
It
And
is.
and so it has to go with a generation of prodigals who don't understand the
Mhm.
heart of the Father. They don't understand that they're sons. And so we have this pandemic orphan spirit, right?
Yep.
Orphan spirits, I'm not wanted. I got to look for it. You become a servant. That's what the older son did. He's trying to
Yep.
work. I'm going to work
Yep.
in the field and I'm going to produce and I'm going to do all this stuff for you because I'm a slave, not a son. That's
Yep.
their perception.
And it ends up being so if you don't navigate this test, right? The test of the prodigal, which is to go wayward, or the test of the elder, which is to earn your way in, right?
Mhm.
Both being failures, and you don't learn what it is to go and abide in the house, because when I talk about this particular story, there are three sons in the story. Everyone always says it's a story of two sons, but it's not. It's a story of three sons because there's the son that's narrating the story. And he's narrating it from the perspective of inside the house because he knows when the father goes in and comes out, which means he's inside.
Yeah.
And so you have Jesus talking to two sets of Jews, sinners, tax collectors, and the religious, elders and prodigal. He's using this language and he's speaking as a Jew to Jews. And he's saying, guys, come in the house. Come in the house and be in the house with the Father. Because when you're in the house, then you see that from the right perspective, not from the field and not from the wayward land, but inside the house. But if you fail this, right? And this is where I think the shift sometimes happens. If you fail to stay inside the structure that is the house, that is present with the Father, you end up in a place where if you stay in ministry, but not from within the house, you almost inevitably become the hireling. Ministry becomes a means to an end. Ministry becomes a way to validate yourself because you're not in the house with the Father hearing his good delight and pleasure over you. You're out, you're either going to strive or you're going to go wayward, but you're going to do it from a place that says, how do I get mine? Because both
Yeah.
of them, the prodigal, give me my inheritance. The elder, why don't I have a fattened calf? Always me focused. And the
Yeah.
hireling, I think, ultimately is the mature form of that. I am focusing on me and I want me to be fed and I want what's mine. And when you have a son or a leader that's underneath who is saying, I want what's mine, there is no form of correction that they're not going to call abuse.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, Adam. That's good, right?
Yeah, well, how could they not? Because their whole focus is the only thing that is good is my growing, my enlargement, my favor, my blessing. So when it's like, no, no, your character's lacking. How dare you? Why would you say that to me? Don't you know that my star is to shine above all this? It's like almost all of them have a Joseph syndrome. It's like,
Uh-huh.
and you sit back and you go, please hear me, because if not, you will have a Joseph experience.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
fathers can save you from pits and prisons.
That's a great point. Look at Moses, right? Moses quickly elevated, right?
Mhm.
He
Yep.
now he's like, I'm gonna do this, slays the Egyptian, and
Yep.
then he's defamed. He's 40 years in the desert, where really
Mhm.
he understands like what it is to be a son. So when that time comes that, hey, you're gonna be over like you're gonna be over all of Israel, right? And
Yep.
he's like, man, not me. He's
Yeah.
no longer that guy. He's no longer that guy of like, yeah, I'm in Pharaoh's court. I'm going to carry out my thing. But now he's in a place of I'm a man of stuttering lips. I can't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
do this. Like, hey, Aaron, come partner with me on this. Like, I can't do this. And so such the antithesis,
Yeah.
of like, yeah, look at me, all this stuff I have. He's not operating from that. He's operating from a place of brokenness.
Yeah.
In Japanese art, there's an amazing art form called kintsugi, and it's kind of cool. And in that art that they just relish is they take broken teacups
Yeah.
and they fill it with gold, and it becomes something better, right?
Yep.
And so in the world today, they're going to say, well, if it's broken, it can't be used, right? If you're broken, throw it away, trash it. But God says, if it's not broken, I cannot use it, right?
Yep.
I resist
Correct.
the proud. I embrace the humble. And humility, if God opposes the proud, he embraces the humble, right?
Yep.
Right? God opposes the proud. It's like magnets when you put them together, and you got the one, it's repellent. Pride is repellent, but humility is a God attractant, right?
Yeah.
Such the antithesis of things today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we want
humility is ultimately tested in the ability of, can you let someone tell you you have a flaw? Can you be told you're wrong? Can you? I think my favorite one, and this, is the Jack Hayford play. Everybody that got hired there at first got to go clean the toilets. Have to clean the why?
I got
a PhD. Yeah, you got a PhD. And it's like, no, please go clean, because if you can't clean the toilets, like, how can you teach the deep things of God and not serve the simplest things?
Yeah, that right. So true, right?
Yeah.
And
well, my generation doesn't want to do that. If you tell my generation, show up early, stay late, if you tell them, hey, you have to go take the job that nobody wants, well, that's not, God gave me a dream that I'm called to be. I'm a prophet. Don't you know I'm an aspiring apostle? And I'm like, there's a lot of aspiration. I can see that, but it's, I guess for me, I grew up with all older pastors. So I did every job the church has ever had. I've been janitor, I've been toilet cleaner, I've been snow shoveler, although that's not happening in North Carolina anymore. Praise Jesus, but you just do it. And then the worst part is, it's like, well, it just has to get done. And so then when you find these leaders, I think for me, when the sign of a hireling is when they start making comments like, that's not my job.
Yo, that's good. And here's something. So if you're listening to this and somebody tells you something, how do we operate in humility? Don't discard it, but bring it to the Lord and go, is there truth in this? Yep. Right? You need to contemplate on it. You need to really go inward and go, yeah, okay. So, and humility says, yeah, if they're seeing something in me that I'm not seeing, and they love me enough to speak truth to me, which isn't easy for the person speaking truth. Okay. It's like, man, you're putting me in an awkward place, but I got to say this to you because I care enough about you. You need to really contemplate on that. So I'll tell you, Adam, this is like my first journey in ministry. I was like 21 years old, get radically saved, rededicate my life, baptized, and all this. And the pastor of that church, who I really admire in a lot of ways, because as soon as I got my heart to the Lord, I got baptized, and the next day I was in his office going through deliverance. Right? It's like, okay, man, we're going to clean up everything. I think that's brilliant. But he sees me and he goes, son, you have an anointing of God on you. And I'm like, they notice. Of course. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Is that not, I am called by God, right? I'm called by God. He notices it. It's obvious. And he goes, I want you to be ready on Wednesday night. And I go, I will be ready on Wednesday night. Ready for what? To minister. Okay. So I'm thinking in my mind, he's going to let me speak on Wednesday night. Wow. And I just got to laugh at myself. So here I am. I show up early. That's a good point, right? Like, be there early. Why is that? Because if you're serving, right? So I'm there early and I'm looking around the room, and I go up to him and I'm like, hey, so I'm all ready. He goes, good. You're ready to serve. I go, I am. See all those chairs over there? I go, I do. He goes, I want you to set them up. I go, I'll do that. So
I'm your guy.
You're perfect, man. Rows are lined up, tape measures. They're straight. And then I go up to him and I go, okay, they're done. What do you want me to do? He goes, I want you to sit down. So I sit down and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm ready. And I can't believe this, Adam, but he went up and he spoke and he never called me up. Now I have reason to be offended. Are you with me on that?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, you told me this, and
Mhm.
now, and so I get done. I'm like, I thought you said I had a call of God on my life. He goes, you do. And I go, well, I was prepared. And he goes, what were you prepared to do? And I'm like, I was prepared to speak. He goes, but you weren't prepared to serve. And I go, I guess not. And I go, so, and he goes, but your ministry's not over. I go, what do you want me to do? He goes, see all the chairs you set up? And I go, yeah. He goes, I want you to put them back where you got them. And I did that for a year and a half.
Yep.
I set up chairs for a year and a half,
Yep.
right? And it wasn't about the chairs, it was about my heart. And it because I got cut on by a father who loved me enough to go, yeah, I see the calling in God on your life, but you got to learn how to learn how to serve and do it in humility, right?
I think one thing we don't do now too, alongside that note, and I think that's phenomenal. We also have stopped requiring of young men that they actually have a prayer life or that they are consistent in like the actually seeking the Lord. So like when I came up, before I was ever serving, before I was a teenager, the sign that you were sincerely pursuing the Lord, you attended corporate prayer meetings in more than one. You were taking chunks of your time away to pray. Um, and I find it interesting now when you talk to people, especially again, speaking of my generation, right? So if you're watching this, I'm 35. I'm speaking of this, millennials and down, right? I don't know what up above me is like. I can't wait to not find out what it's like to be older. But while I'm here, I'm speaking to us. And I'm saying within our generation, there is a lack of requiring of young and aspiring ministers that they have a prayer life.
Ooh.
And one of the reasons I think it's important, like, people will tell me all the time, I pray, I pray, I pray. All right, well, that's going to show up in your life. If you're easily offended, you don't have a deep prayer life.
Yep.
If you're someone that holds grudges, you don't have a deep prayer because you can't go into the presence again and again and again, and the Lord not go, hey, that person you're holding, bitterness against, you got to give that to me, right? And so that place where the offense that can come, that gets you to, let's say, go back to our original point of leaving the tent early because you've been cut on. One of the things that I used to do when a leader would like say something that hurt, right? Or even when, maybe they were too strong with me, was I'd go pray through it. Yep. And I'd go wrestle with it. And I would do this lesson that I actually learned from Jeremiah Johnson, funny enough. When he said, Adam, if any criticism you get, look into it and ask what part of it's true. Like, it doesn't matter if it's from like your ardent enemy. See if there's any truth in it, because that criticism could help you. It could help you to fix something, to get strong. Not everything they say is true, and especially if someone's your enemy, but they may have something. And that's where it's like, instead of us getting offended, it's like, okay, well, this leader, right, who shouldn't be an enemy, but let's just say he is. Maybe you've decided your leader is a Saul. You've done the projection issue, right? Yeah, I'll leave the door to go that route. But let's say you decided he's a Saul. Ooh, I lost Nick. Then from there, I'm going to keep going. And then when Nick gets back on, we'll see what happens. But if you've lost, or if you've decided your leader's a Saul, even that critique that they bring, let me bring Nick back in here. Ooh, is he coming? Going? I think I can get him. There he is.
Hey, sorry, man. I was transported. I was like in the third heavens.
Well, what I decide your leader's a Saul and they critique you, right? Place for us. I love that you did just disappear. Did you go to China and back? Did you get people?
I was. It was awesome, but I'm back.
Okay, good. I'm glad. The miracle. Anyhow, you have to have this ability to take that critique, that criticism, even that hurtful thing, and say, okay, I'm going to go pray on this and see if Jesus can make use of it and like performing his character in me. And that's where I think so often we run from it. We don't want to even take the time to consider that we have a blind spot or that the leader is trustworthy.
Oh, that's so good, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know your blind spot, and we have to realize that. And prayer helps you realize your blind spots.
Yeah, so when we look at the disciples, right, they delegate off. You guys serve the tables, you guys do all this, because our main role is to be studying the scripture and to pray. Yep. Right. And we went out, saw David Hogan this weekend. He was in town and he goes, my job, this is what I do. I just pray and I do this, right?
Yep.
And we fail to understand in prayer that when you have been cut, you have been hurt, right? Well, what does the Bible say? Bless those who curse you. pray for those who persecute you.
Yeah.
But we are so easily to harbor an offense. We're so easily to start meditating on the wrong done to us that we've become an offended generation, of
Yep.
people that get cut. They're bleeding all over the place. And well, I'll just go where I'm appreciated, and I'll just go, I'm a prophet. And, that
Yeah.
pastor doesn't appreciate my gift. But what if the Lord put you in a place so that pastor does, right?
Yeah. What
Well,
if he appreciates it so much he wants to make it better?
true, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
pruning. He wants to cut because you're fruitful, but he wants to cut so that you're more fruitful.
that's true, right? He sees
Yeah.
something in you that you don't see,
Yeah.
right? That he sees a pride or he sees a shortcoming that is like, okay, you need to develop this fruit. And for those of you guys that haven't seen Adam's teaching, he's talking to the fruit of the Spirit on Saturday night. But he wants to build that up in you, right? And grow.
Yeah.
And fruit is pruned to develop better and sweeter fruit, right? Which is something we're always working to that place of transformation, sanctification.
Well, and I think too, if you look at what the line of thought, right? So earlier you said sometimes we have sons who are well into their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they should be fathers, right? They should be raising up, but they're still in many ways operating in a place of immaturity. And usually that is, if you track it in their history, you go, hey, when's the last guy you let cut on you and you stayed put? And now sometimes they have horror stories, abusive leader paradigms. I'm not denying that those things exist, but there should be this place of saying, out of that unhealthy thing, this is what the Lord did for me, or he taught me, or how he matured me. When you see that pattern of like not breaking free, it's almost indicative, or at least it's a sign to me as a leader that they never stayed in the tent.
Oof.
They didn't heal. And so they have scars that show cutting, but it's infected. It's not, it's actually become wounded. It's a wounded place rather than a place of consecration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ultimately the difference between a wound and consecration is giving it the appropriate amount of time of healing and staying in so even when you look at that, because I love this analogy, but they stayed in the tent. What that meant is they were all together. They didn't leave community.
Yeah.
They didn't leave life with others and
Yep.
go try to heal on their own. They stayed where the healing forced them to keep addressing, allowed people to rebandage, put salve on. I don't know how you have your buddy help you with that. That's, Pastor. Next week, Dr. Nick will explain how they help one another heal. But but there's this place of community where that happens, right? And I think so often, because we're so afraid of rejection, or because we haven't dealt with this wound, then this next leader comes to cut because it's still there.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm going to go back to the cycle before. This is then all of a sudden start hearing, this is what always happens. And it's like, maybe you've refused the maturing of Christ that is the cutting of this place.
Yeah. Well, go back to the older son, right? In Luke chapter 15, he's like, you go back to all the things that you've done in ministry. So if you're older, you're like, look at all the things I've done. And aren't I deserving on this? Right.
Yep.
And so you'll see that son, he's not called the older father, he's called the older son. Right.
Yeah.
But he's never come into fatherhood look at this, look at this, look at this. But you've missed somebody down along the way. You don't know who you are. You haven't got that revelation that you're a father's house, which you said.
Well, and there's a place too where you go, in that story, the elder brother, by that point, just looking at the culture, he spent years away as a prodigal, right? The elder brother probably should have already been married and had sons.
Exactly. Oh,
we don't know that. Obviously, we're reading into the silence there of that story. But just in the culture, he should have been mature enough where he had his own house, his own things. And there's a place where when you get caught in slavery, in the sense of I'm going to earn my way up in the kingdom, you end up not producing life. You produce great levels of work. You can show all the things you've done, but you can't look and say, hey, here's sons and daughters I've raised up. Here's people I've equipped. Here's mature, healthy marriages that I mentored and I did. No, all you can point back to is look at the ministries I ran. Look at the positions I had. Look at the titles I had. And it's like, oh, you never got to the place of reproducing life, which means you never came into actually living out as a father. which is the father's dream. Every dream of a father is that their son will come to maturity and then they become a father as well. And that doesn't happen.
That's, you know what, that is a great point. Sons can't reproduce, but fathers do, right?
Yeah.
And so for
and
those
the sign
guys,
of maturity is you do that.
yeah, for those of you guys who turned on today, we're talking about fathers, we're talking about sons, we're talking about speaking truth and having the courage to speak truth, that God prunes those whom he loves, he speaks life, and the maturity that God is trying to raise up in the body of Christ today. So we make disciples, not sons, but we make disciples. And so, Adam, anything else you'd like to add into this today?
Yeah, I'm going to throw another curveball out there, just one additional thought.
Okay.
I think sometimes we get into this place of saying, well, we judge the fathers. Well, whoever's my leader is not good enough. He's not healthy enough. He's not this, that, or the other. Right. But then there's this question of, well, can you be an Elisha to an Elijah? Elijah's not a healthy father by any account. There's nothing in the text that implies he is emotionally healthy. He is stable. They're like, Joker's suicidal before he meets Elisha. Like the day before, he's going to kill me. So this is not the bread and butter of who you want to mentor you. Even though we love this Elijah-Elisha paradigm, right? Like that's the prophetic paradigm. But look at it; it's jacked up from Jump Street. And so, with that in mind, Elisha, what does Elisha bring to Elijah? He takes away Elijah's loneliness. Elijah's greatest complaint is, I'm alone. From the day Elisha shows up, he can't, at the end of his life, he can't even get alone. He's trying to be alone again. And Elisha's like, no, you're not allowed to go back.
Yeah. Don't you know your master will take it away today? But I won't leave him.
About it. Yeah, because guess what? He understood as a son that his chief assignment to Elijah was to never let him be alone again.
Yep.
And sometimes you have fathers or leaders who aren't the healthiest or the strongest, or they do some things. And it's like, well, what is your role as an Elisha to your Elijah? If we're going to use that paradigm, what are you called to supplement in their life rather than highlighting as a weakness of them? And I feel like so many in this generation, there's no heart to that. It's no, what can I get? Give me, give me, give me, not what am I called to bring to you? And I think when I meet young leaders that can't answer that question, that's a great sign that you're a hireling.
Yeah, you know, Adam, so many times we fail to realize the humanity that and the divinity, right? Colossians 1:27, Christ in us, but the humanity. And the grace comes that we see in Elisha is that he got a double portion. He got that mantle, but you'll never get that mantle until you serve. And Elijah was rough, man. Elijah was just rough, right? I mean, even to the last thing, stay on the other side of the river, don't go. And I'm sure Elijah knew what was going on, right? I'm going to be taken up, you know. But Elijah persevered. There was a tenacity. So there's a tenacity of when we're cut. There's a tenacity of being unoffendable, and there's a tenacity of like, you know what, God, you have something for me that's preparing me for my promised land. So good stuff,
Adam. The people and send them out. Hey, great chat again today.
Yeah, that was good, man. So when we're on this stuff, we're like, what are we going to talk about today? And like, that's good. And so it's just good to interact like that. Let me pray for you guys. Father, I don't know, Tiffany, it's good to have you on today. Can I prophesy a little bit over some of the people, Adam?
Hey, whatever you feel, Doc.
Yeah. So Tiffany, I'm going to pray for you right now. I thank you for wisdom, compassion. I don't know if you married and have kids, but Father, I just see that mantle being passed down to your children. I hope I'm right on that you have kids. But Father, let your glory come down now in the name of Jesus. Father, Bob and Karen are on today. Father, I pray over Karen. We had a good report over Karen. They thought Karen had a cyst in her back, and she went to the doctors, and they couldn't find the cyst. They just found some blood vessels down there in a clump, which is way better than that. So Lord, I thank you for continual healing in Karen's back. And Father, for those who are on right now, Father, pour out your glory upon them right now. Father, let us have the revelation that you're for us, you're not against us. Father, I want to thank you for grace, perseverance, and the grace to be unoffendable in a time where the world is highly offendable. So Father, bless my friends. Love you guys. See you later.
Take care. God bless.